Hello, and welcome to our presentation, Points North Certified Payroll Reporting Integrated with QuickBooks Online Payroll. I'm Nick Foucault, General Manager and Executive Director with Points North, and we're very excited to present today on the power of the integration of our Certified Payroll Reporting System with QuickBooks Online Payroll to help efficiently automate the production of certified payroll reports, sometimes called prevailing wage reports, Davis-Bacon reports, immediately after the processing of your pay period in QuickBooks Online Payroll. A bit about Points North. As a company, we are a compliance software solutions company, and we have a focused construction franchise team dedicated to our certified payroll reporting product. Our expertise here is in prevailing wage compliance and reporting. We have experience in helping contractors and construction companies of all sizes with their certified payroll reporting compliance. We have dedicated teams behind our product, both in the customer success area, as well as our senior engineering team. All of our development takes place in-house, and we are now a 25+ year company that operates with speed and agility in everything that we do. A bit of background on what certified payroll reporting really is. There's a federal law from the 1930s called the Davis-Bacon Act. That's the law that required prevailing wages to be paid when working on public works projects or government-funded jobs. Basically, if you take on a job from the government, you will have to pay the wages that they stipulate based on the type of work that the employees are performing. And of course, because it is a government compliance issue, there's also a requirement to submit a report each pay period that will detail everything that happened on that particular project within that particular pay period. The employees that were on the job, the hours they were working by day, the rates that they were being paid, the type of work they were doing, specific paycheck details. And there are many different formats of these certified reports all over the country, federal, state, municipal formats. Ultimately, what our solution will do is allow a client to send that data directly from QuickBooks Online Payroll to our certified reporting solution, and then populate those very specific reports, which we'll take a look at when we get to the demonstration topic of the presentation. Some common themes around our client base: they are working on government-funded jobs. They are working in the prevailing wage, Davis-Bacon, certified payroll space. A lot of those terminologies end up being used interchangeably. The WH-347 is a specific certified report, the federal format put out by the US Department of Labor, and a very common report format that our clients are required to produce. And our clients are tracking hours worked by day and by project, work classification, the prevailing wage rates that correspond to those, so that they can be placed properly onto the certified reports, which again, we'll take a look at shortly. The common problems in this space, a lack of a process, and especially a process that involves integration with the payroll system being utilized, leads to a lot of confusion, a lot of time and energy spent moving the data from one place to another, so that ultimately it ends up on the very specific certified report format per project. And so not having a system that can actually integrate directly with payroll can be a challenge. A lack of knowledge surrounding certified payroll report formats and the various requirements involved in those formats, that can lead to a lot of frustration, which is where our team is ready to help, along with, of course, the technology, the software, but also with our subject matter expertise, in the sense that we can help a client understand a particular certified report that they may not have been required to produce, and that just recently became a necessity for them. We've talked with clients who have spent upwards of 20 hours a week manually entering data into online third-party platforms. The state of California is a great example. In recent years, their Department of Industrial Relations built an online system to begin receiving certified payroll data. And you have two options: either load it in through a very, very specifically formatted XML file, or type it all in by hand, pay period to pay period. Well, typing it in by hand is not an efficient use of time. And so your alternative is to load in that file, which our system is capable of producing. And if you fall behind on reports, you will have your payments held up. We've had clients who have just gotten a pay period or two behind on producing the reports that correspond to their projects, and the payments that they're owed for their work on those projects are paused until those reports are done in the correct format and submitted. So if you fall behind on those reports, there's certainly a risk that those payments will be held up. As far as our integration with QuickBooks Online, this is really where the efficiency of the API, the application program interface, comes into play. And you can see here that having employee and payroll data in QuickBooks Online, and optionally in QuickBooks Time, which we'll talk more about as well, allows that data now to flow automatically just by processing payroll over into the Points North certified payroll reporting system. That's where then clients are able to generate those specific certified reports, take those and submit those to the government agencies that they're required to submit them to. Here are 3 examples of over 75 different certified report formats. In the center, we see a City of New York specific format. On the far right, that federal WH347, and on the left, a California state specific format. These formats are predicated off the same data elements, but it's very, very important that clients are adhering to the required format that their particular project calls for. That ultimately is the main premise of our system, is that no matter which specific format a client requires, they will be able to produce the most current compliant version of that certified report by utilizing our solution. And if a new certified report format comes into existence, it will be immediately implemented in our solution so that clients can begin to generate it. So now we'll move to a demonstration of not only our system and how it works, but also the integration that we've built to the QuickBooks Online Payroll solution. And that's where I'll begin, by pulling up QuickBooks Online. And the way that a client can access the certified payroll reporting system is through single sign-on within QuickBooks Online. So there's no separate website, no separate username or password for a client to use. A client would simply navigate to the apps area within QuickBooks, go to My Apps, and if they've purchased our solution, the certified payroll reporting icon will be visible, and they're able to then simply launch the platform. And when a client launches the platform, this is the page that they're greeted with. This, of course, is being demo data. Our implementation process involves getting each and every client's account set up to reflect their particulars. So the appropriate pay period ending dates, for example. But the premise of our solution is that the data that is in QuickBooks Payroll, employee details, paycheck details, that data will now flow automatically from QuickBooks to the certified payroll reporting solution. For example, we can see under company setup, there's a page for employee data. If we look at the employees that are in the system currently, we can review those same employees in QuickBooks Online. Here, for example, is Mr. Johnson. And over in the Points North system, we can look at his specific details. Here, for example, we see that he is at 456 Red Wing Street, which is the detail we see here in QuickBooks. Now, the premise is that clients do not need to manually enter this employee data directly into the Points North system. It will flow to us automatically through the integration. And to demonstrate that, we see again 456 Red Wing Street. If we were to edit this to be 123 Main Street directly in QuickBooks, we'll save that change. And we'll note that that address is now updated in QuickBooks. Over in the Points North system, it still says 456 Red Wing Street. To show the integration, under this API data synchronization page, we can simply click Get Employees. And what's happened is the system has gone and found that there's been a change to Jake Johnson directly in QuickBooks. And we'll now see back on the employees page in our solution that the address for this gentleman is now 123 Main Street. So a very simple example, but one that will provide great efficiency to a client as they no longer need to set employee data up specifically in points north. It will automatically flow over as part of this integration process. The same can be said for paycheck details. I will navigate back to a particular pay period for which I have some sample data. This is also an important point to note about our solution, which is that all of the various pay periods of data will always be accessible to a client. So if a client needed to navigate back to, for example, March of this year and work with data from that particular pay period, which is a common thing in the certified reporting world, they'd very easily be able to do so. They could navigate back, even though we're in the month of August presently, to the month of March, select the pay period ending date, and then go review the data that was present in our solution for that point in time. And that data looks like this. So again, we see Jake and the rest of the employees as well that are in the system. But focusing on this one particular pay period, we see this particular employee with their gross pay and their deduction details flowing into our solution from QuickBooks. And again, to demonstrate where that data resides, if we go back into QuickBooks and we go to this employee's paycheck list, we can review a report. I happen to have data from the last quarter. And we can see that total pay and that net pay and this employee's check number. Again, that detail is here in our solution. Note that the check number right now is 500. If we were to change that here in QuickBooks to, for example, 999, and we'll save that change, the same premise applies to integrating paycheck details as it does employee details. Back in our system on that data synchronization page, we can synchronize the data specific to this particular pay period, which would have been from March 4th in this example through March 12th. And I will click the button to synchronize that data. And back on our data entry page, we now see 999 as a check number. So this data synchronization works the same way for the paycheck details as it does for the employee details. This data will automatically be in our solution after each and every pay period that's processed in QuickBooks Online. You'll note that the specific deduction details can be broken out further here on this page if you're generating a certified payroll report that requires more granular deduction details. And we'll go through that in a moment. You may be wondering, how often will this data synchronization occur? Will a user always have to come into our solution and click the buttons that we've seen on this page to make the data synchronization activate? The answer is no. This only happens one time during our implementation process, and then on a nightly basis, the data will synchronize automatically into our solution. Clients do also always have the option to come to this page and pull the data over more quickly on demand if there's a need for them to do so. For example, they've hired a new employee and that person's been put into payroll at 9 a.m. and the client wants to use that employee on a certified report that same day. Coming to this page and clicking Get Employees would bring that employee instantaneously into our solution rather than waiting for the nightly process. Back to the premise of our solution, once that data has synchronized over from QuickBooks, would be that the other piece of the puzzle is the time data. So a client would be able to do a one-time setup of their projects and work classifications directly in our solution, so that they're then able to enter the hours worked by day and by project and work class. That would look something like this. Perhaps Jake Johnson worked 1 hour on Friday on the bridge work project as a carpenter. But if they also worked another hour on Friday, but this time on a different certified project, which will require its own report, adding that time data involves simply clicking this button, creating another table to enter again another hour on the same day. But this time, perhaps it was not on the bridge work project, but rather the road work project. And perhaps Jake Johnson was not a carpenter when he was performing this particular hour, but rather an electrician. And you can see by adding in the hours by day, by project, and then by work classification, the necessary detail is now here to go very easily generate specific certified reports on a project basis. And if you were wondering how these project and work classifications come to be in our solution, I will save those changes and I'll show the work classes page in our system. This is a simple process of adding each work classification one time. First with the code and then with a description. The code simply needs to be unique for the description, then to be populated on a specific certified payroll report. The same premise applies to projects. If we look at the project detail in our system, this is where there are two distinct projects that have been set up with some simple data elements like a name, start date, whether prime or subcontractor is relevant. And then clients are able to assign specific certified report formats to each individual project. For example, if the bridge work project takes place in a specific state, perhaps California, for example, a client can open up the California list of certified reports and simply associate one of those report formats to that particular project. I've gone ahead and done that here so that we can go and actually generate some certified reports on this page. And this is where we have our two specific projects, the bridge work project and the road work project. Perhaps the bridge work project needs the WH347, that federal certified report. By clicking generate report, that's the specific report that we'll produce. Make this a bit bigger. And we can see that Jake Johnson's information has now translated onto this specific certified report in a way that's appropriate. Each report is calling for the data slightly differently. And to illustrate that point, I will generate this time a specific New York City certified report for the same project. We'll see that Jake's information is now on this report, which looks very different. But ultimately, this is the current compliant version of the certified report, specifically for the Office of the Comptroller in New York City. This is the main premise of our solution, in that clients, which we have in all 50 states, will need to generate very different certified reports based on the conditions of their projects. And I should note that these reports go all the way through what's called the statement of compliance. That's the signature page where you can apply even a digital signature using our solution, so that the report is completed and finalized once it's generated in our system and ready to take and submit to the appropriate party. We also fully support electronic file exports from our solution. For example, that California Department of Industrial Relations portal is requiring that clients load data in from an XML file format. You can see here that I've associated that format to this particular project. And rather than generate report, the wording is export file for the California Electronic Certified Payroll Record System. If I were to click this button, the client is able to now export a data file in the specific format that will be ready to import directly to the California system. A client would not need to open this file and review it. They would simply save it out of our solution somewhere to their computer and go import it directly then to the California state system. There's a number of these online portals throughout the country with very different electronic file formatting requirements, all of which our solution will support. Now, to go back into some specifics involving report setup, if we were to take a look again at the WH347 on this report data page, there are certain elements of data that the client will need to populate onto that report that are simply not going to exist in QuickBooks Online. For example, the name of the signatory party that should be the signer of that particular report, or whether or not a particular checkbox should be checked on the statement of compliance. This page is the page that allows a user to set these details one time for each individual report, for each individual project, so that the reports that are going to be generated pay period to pay period will now have all of the appropriate data populated without a client needing to interact with that data over and over. There are also numerous report options, which you can see here. For example, there may be a requirement for a client to show an employee's address on a particular WH347 versus another WH347 for a different project. You're being required to expressly omit an employee's address. These report options will allow clients to generate different formats and populate the data that's necessary based on the specifics of their individual contracts. You may also be wondering, what if I'm using QuickBooks Time? Will I need to be entering in the time data the way that you've seen directly in our user interface? Or can I bring that time data over through a similar integration? The answer is that you can bring it over through an API integration, just like we have with QuickBooks Online Payroll. And just to demonstrate that briefly, I'll remove the time data that I've entered already, and I'll save those changes. And now we can see that there is no time data at all for this gentleman in our system. We still have his paycheck details and his employee details, but we're lacking the time details. If in QuickBooks Time, there was time data indicative of this breakout, we can see this gentleman has particular hours, worked on particular dates, on particular projects. Our QuickBooks Time integration will allow this detail to flow over just the way that the paycheck details flow over from payroll. And to demonstrate that, we would simply click this Upload Work Data button to call that work data in from QuickBooks Time. We can note that that was processed successfully, and the data entry page is now indicative of that time data that came in directly from QuickBooks Time. You may also be curious about storing and managing rates, both just prevailing wage rates in general, or what are commonly known as fringe rates, amounts paid to different plans or funds, which are required to populate onto certain certified reports. Our system is fully capable of allowing a client to store and manage those rates. That occurs on what we call our rate management page. Now, this is in a post-payroll sense, in that once this page is being worked with, payroll has already completed through QuickBooks Online. But to move this data onto a certified report specifically, fringe rates can be configured based on client requirements. This, of course, again, being demo data. Some clients may have fringes specifically for a training fund or an apprenticeship program or health and welfare. All of this is configured with a client during their implementation so that the specific rate categories can have rates configured towards them. And those rates can be configured on a project basis, a work class basis, an employee basis, or a combination of those factors. So for example, if whenever an employee is going to be working an hour as a laborer, you'll see the list of work classifications appearing here. Laborer could be selected, and then the rates that are applicable for that work class can be configured. This is done on an effective date range basis so that our system can retain the rates through time. So if you need to go back to a previous pay period and generate a report that's been generated in the past, the applicable rates will still be in our solution to flow through to that report. So for example, if we were to put in a start date of January 1st and an end date of December 31st of this year, perhaps the cash fringe rate for this work class is $1. I can save that rate. And perhaps I also have another layer of rate management where whenever somebody is working as a laborer, but when they are working as a laborer on the bridge work project, both of those levels can be selected, which then allows a user to set up another rate that will only be applicable when this combination has hours entered towards it. The result of this is that these fringe rates will flow directly onto any applicable certified payroll reports. For example, back on this page, we can now see a $1 cash fringe rate for this work class of laborer. This is a result of configuring that rate on our rate management page. By now generating a certified report specifically for that project, we will see on this California specific format that fringe detail is able to be shown. So we are now dealing not only with deductions, but also with those fringe rates. By applying these fringe rate details into our solution, the rates can flow through onto a California specific report or any specific report that requires that granularity. You may be wondering, how can I find out more about this solution and how to potentially bring it on board in conjunction with my QuickBooks Online Payroll system? Well, the best way to find more details is on the QuickBooks App Store, which you can see at this URL, quickbooks.intuit.com/app. If you were to search on this page for Points North, you'll see our solution come up, Certified Payroll Reporting. And this is the listing on the QuickBooks App Store with more details. Again, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to present today.